for anyone who's listening who comes from a working class background, you get paid a lot of money when you're a corporate lawyer. And it was the money and what that money meant to my family. My dad would be like, I remember I got my first check at Davis Polk, he framed it. Because it was like, what? You're making in a month what I make in a year? You know what I mean? Like, it was just, wow, yeah. It was just, and so that whole, like, I finally made them proud kind of thing by the money was like, even though for me, the money wasn't, I was making a dent in my loans. I wasn't like living life large, you know what I mean? I had a, 300 square foot apartment, but it was, what it looked like was that I was fulfilling the American dream, but I was miserable. And I knew I was miserable. I wasn't fulfilled. And again, I feel very lucky because I knew when I was 12, 13, kind of what the path and the work that I wanted to do. So I was so off path. And I'm getting older now. Now I'm like in my early 30s and I'm like, wait, I'm not young again. Like I can't go do something that's so off path for me and then go find later what I really want to do. I got to make a move. And so I often tell people, for me, I make changes when I hit rock bottom. And I was rock bottom. I was like, that Sunday night feeling when you're just sick because you don't want to go to work the next day. That's how I felt every single day for like a year or over a year. And I knew that it was time to go. So I quit. And before I quit, there was this, there was a whisper in New York City that there was going to be this open congressional race. And I've always been obsessed. I've always been into politics. I've always been an organizer. I was active in Democratic politics. So I was like, okay, here's my shot. I'm going to run for office. And it was just, it's about the blissfulness of naivety and being young. Yeah, right. And not really understanding that, like, you had that's never happening. You know what I mean? Or like you have a zero, you just so much chance like to win the lottery. But I really believed that I could work really hard and I had a great story and I could meet every voter and that I could get there.
All right, welcome everyone to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. We are very excited that you joined us. If you haven't tuned in, this is the show where we talk to celebrities, thought, and industry leaders to really discover their journey to success. I am super excited that you're joining us. This show is like no other. I can promise you that. You might laugh, you might cry, but you will definitely leave inspired and gain a whole new level of insight into those people that you follow, love, and admire. All right, what's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Jake Dunlap Show. This is going to be a fun one. This week's guest was cruising the courtrooms as an attorney before she surged onto the political stage as the first, this is kind of crazy, the first Indian American to run for U.S. Congress. And this wasn't like in the 70s or 80s. This is relatively new, which is pretty crazy. Now she is tackling the gender gap in technology for pay. And it's a topic that, as someone who works in tech, is very real. And it's exciting to be able to talk through this today and talk about what we can do to better support and empower people who are impacted by this, especially coming out of the pandemic. Her list of achievements, okay, I'm just going to try to take a breath here, right? Fortune World's Greatest Leaders, Fortune 40 Under 40, Wall Street Journal Magazine Innovator of the Year, Forbes Most Powerful Women Changing the World, Fast Company 100 Most Creative People, winner of the Harold McGraw Prize in Education, mother, wife, and please join me in welcoming the master of building movements, the commander of GirlsWhoCode, Reshma Saujani. Reshma, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's so exciting to be here.
Yeah, good. I'm looking forward to this one. Like I said, I was like, am I supposed to, you want me to like call these? Like, there's a lot here. Like you've done a lot of cool shit. It's exciting. So for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, we focus on the journey of entrepreneurs, leaders, executives, and the things that help to shape them along the way. We find that we learn from the stories. We learn from these weird things that happened to us when we were 10 years old, and we put this chip on our shoulder and these other things that happen. And so, Reshma, we're going to go back in time, and we were talking about this a little bit, and we're going to start in Schamburg. So born in Schamburg, which for those of you who don't know is like just right outside of Chicago. It's not too far away. It's just a little bit north. And I told you I would tell the story, so I will tell the story. I worked at a company, and they did their annual sales kickoff in Schamburg in January.
Oh.
Okay, I want to tell you, and now it was amazing. I think like Bill Clinton spoke, like who else? Like Colin Powell. Like, I mean, it was like the lineup was. I mean, they did it right, but I mean, it was like -20 with wind chill. I mean, I don't think I've ever been that cold in my entire life.
It's freezing there. It really is.
You're like,
it's
it is
freezing.
So what was life like growing up then? You know, we're talking like, you know, late 70s, early 80s here. You know, you're outside of Chicago, but you're still like very, very close. You know, like what are some like the big memories you have of, you know, growing up?
Oh God, my dad took out like my middle school yearbooks when I was home 2 weeks ago, and I was like walking down memory lane. You know, my parents came here as refugees, and so they came when they were in their 20s. To this country and to Chicago, Illinois. They had talked about being cold. They showed up at the airport wearing shorts and t-shirts because they had never seen.
Because they came
from Uganda.
Right?
They had never seen snow before, and but you know they were welcomed by the Catholic Charities. My father ended up changing his name from Mukun to Mike. They, you know, back in the 80s, if you came in, or in the 70s, if you came as an immigrant, you were assimilating. You know, you were eating at Taco Bell, Pizza Hut, you know, dancing to, you know, George Michael. Like, it was a different, that's, you wanted to be American. And so I very much grew up as one of the few brown families, you know, in a working class town. And it had a profound effect on me. I mean, I think I was really mad that my mom named me, you know, Reshma, because nobody could pronounce it. You know, literally, it wasn't until like 4 years ago that I was using my niece's name Maya when I went to Starbucks, because I was so irritated to be like, Reshma, it's a freshman without the F and the N. But, you know, having a name that people can't pronounce when you're in middle school is like brutal. But so much of their experience, you know, is what led me to be who I am today, because I love this country, because it literally saved my parents' life. And I had to learn at a very young age to be comfortable in my own skin and to not run away from my identity, but to embrace it and to, you know, be friends with people who are very different than me.
Yeah. And I mean, again, obviously, I mean, for those of you who don't know the kind of the full story, you know, your dad, he was in the military in Uganda.
No,
right?
He wasn't in the military. He was an engineer, but the dictator Idi Amin basically came out. He was a crazy guy. Yeah. He had like a dream.
Yeah, insane.
And he kind of got on television and was like, I had a dream that I should expel all of the Ugandan Asians from the country. My parents were born in Uganda. My grandparents were born in Uganda. This was their home.
Wow.
And so to be expelled like that, literally in 90 days, and you couldn't take anything with you. My mom told me she would hide some of her jewelry in, you know, toothpaste tubes, because they would confiscate everything at the border when they left. So it was a really traumatic experience for my parents. But in many ways, they are the biggest, again, strivers and believers of the American dream.
Yeah, I mean, I literally can't imagine. Again, like, especially at that time, and probably as you're a kid growing up, you don't quite appreciate it the way that, you know, as you get older, you know, it's like, wow, like to overcome that. And once you kind of understand what went on to happen in Uganda in particular, you know, the fact that they did get out was, you know, critical. And so what kind of student were you? So obviously you went on to, you know, be a lawyer. We'll get into that too, and go to University of Illinois, and, you know, then into Harvard. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, and then Yale. But what type of student were you growing up?
I spent a lot of time in detention. I was a troublemaker. Really? Yeah, I was.
Oh, I would not.
No. I was not. I was not Miss Straight A's. I mean, I think part of it was I wasn't challenged. And I think my dad really had to navigate and make sure that I was put in the right classes that actually challenged me. So when I was in classes where I wasn't challenged, I just talked, or I got into trouble, or I made trouble. And then when I got into classes that challenged me, I did well. So yeah, by the time I graduated high school, I was the, you know, valedictorian. I did really well. You know, I graduated first in my class when I went to the University of Illinois, Urbana. I was always a curious kid. Loved to read. You know, part of, you know, my parents worked a lot, and so they would drop us off at the library, you know, instead of like, you know, taking us to a babysitter. Or, we would spend time, at the library while my dad was reading. So I loved to read, loved libraries, read. I'm still like that, voracious. I love to consume everything that I can get my hands on. And so I did like school, I loved to learn. And that's always been, even today, I'm studying the Bhagavad Gita, which is basically, I'm a Hindu, our religious text. And so I wish I could go back to school, at 46 today. But I always loved to learn. But it took me a while. I wasn't one of those, I had to study. I had to read. I had to put work into it. I wasn't one of those people that I had a horrible time with standardized tests. I don't even want to tell you what my ACT or SAT score is. Like, I never would have gotten into college now. Never. I had to take the LSAT like 3 times, before I finally got a decent score. So I was just never a good test taker.
Yeah, I can relate for sure. I think it's interesting. When I talk to a lot of people, first generation, second generation, to the U.S., and it's like there's like this desire, right? And obviously, you went on to become a lawyer, right? Which is very much like doctor, lawyer, like.
Yeah.
You go to school and that drive. Did you have that growing up? Did you have that kind of pressure?
Oh my God,
up?
yeah. We didn't have a choice. My dad was like, you be a doctor, a lawyer, or an engineer. That was it. I mean, school was everything, right? Studying was everything. I mean, even even when you're a girl, like it was about becoming a professional. Again, for them, they're immigrants, right? They want their kids to have a good middle class life. And that means that you have to be in a, quote, stable job, that you're going to get a steady income that you can then go pay for your mortgage. I mean, I graduated with $300,000 in student loan debt. And I remember still, like, my father just being like, sign those documents. And the loans were all in my name. And I was like, Dad, are you sure? Like, that's a lot. He's like, no. The thing that you should always invest in is your education, no matter how much it costs. And that was really what they believed, was that education was everything.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, I mean, what was it? I mean, for you, obviously you talked about it. There's like this, we're talking about like the little bit of pressure there. Is that really why, you went into, again, to go on to get your law degree? I mean, was that
No.
I guess this is my plan.
Because
or what was it that attracted you?
I mean, I was the first lawyer in my family. So they would have much preferred me to be an engineer or a doctor. So but I was a professional. And I took a U-turn. I went and got my master's in public policy. My parents actually disowned me who disowns their kids when they go to Harvard to get their master's in public policy? But my parents did, because it wasn't law school. It wasn't med school. It was truly, no. Truly, you're cut off. I had to go live on a friend's couch and get a job. I mean, I always kind of had a job, but they were not happy with me. When I decided to go.
What was it about public policy? What was it about that you felt again, like a calling or a desire to kind of focus there at the time? Because this is late 90s, just for everyone to kind of give kind of context.
They hated politics. One, why would you do that? Why would you put yourself out there? And I think too, it wasn't a professional degree that they understood. What is a public policy? What job are you going to go get doing that? So for them, and I had gotten into a couple of law schools, so they just didn't understand why I was not just going straight to law school and, beginning my trek again to the professional middle class. And so, it was hard for them to understand. I always had my own path. Yes, and I was always kind of in this back and forth between, do I do the thing that makes my parents happy? Do I get married, in my 20s? Do I find the guy? Do I go to law school now? But I always had this yearning and this pull, even growing up in the Midwest, I was dying to get out of there. I'm probably in my high school friend circle, the only one that left. They're all still live in the same town. You know what I mean? Yeah. Kids going to the same schools, they see their parents. I mean, I just never wanted that. I wanted something different. I didn't know what, but I was always pulled somewhere, and I don't think they could understand.
Right. Where do you think that comes from? When you look back, I mean, in terms of that desire to want, something different. I don't know if you've ever reflected, was there like a turning point, an uncle, an aunt, like where do you feel like that comes from?
Well, I think for me, my turning point was I got into, a schoolyard fight, when I was in middle school, and a girl called me, a derogatory name, and I fought back. And I think that was this turning point where, and maybe I haven't even fully processed it of why, but I think that was a turning point for me when I started organized. I started public speaking. I joined the debate club. I led my first march. I built my first organization. I started fighting back. And that I think I've always been a fighter. So look, I do believe, I feel like, and I'm very spiritual, I feel like I was put on this earth to do a specific thing. And when I try to deviate from that path, I'm always pulled right back in. And so there are times, like with Girls Who Code, I always say, like, building Girls Who Code was a little bit like unicorns and rainbows. Like the world collaborated for me. Same thing with what I'm doing now with Marshall Plan for Moms. So I think I was put on this earth to be a warrior, to be a fighter, to fight for the underserved, to fight for to fight for women and girls. And so I was always, it was just all about getting to that path. And I was always unsettled. When I was working as a corporate lawyer, I was unsettled. When I was, working in many ways, even when I tried to run for office, like, it was hard and it didn't work out. And maybe because that wasn't the path of what I thought I was supposed to be on, to doing the work that I was meant to be doing.
Yeah, let's talk about that, because again, I think for a lot of people, you do go on to get your law degree, right? So a few years later, you go to Yale and you get your law degree, and then you go into this world, so I mean you're in this for close to 10 years or so. For you in particular, you have this successful career that you're building. You're moving a couple different times to different firms, but you're moving up. What was it that you said, I'm going to run for Congress, right? In late 2000s. This is right, just for everyone, this is kind of right after, this is in New York, right after the kind of financial meltdown.
Yeah.
2009, 2010. What was it where you're like, hey, I don't have enough going on. I'm going to go try to make a difference and actually run for Congress.
I think a couple of things. I think the first thing was, I was definitely unhappy and unsatisfied. So, like, I was the girl who, like, first in her class, and then I'm in the corporate law firm, and I'm like at the bottom of the, of the list. Right. I am not excelling there because I'm not putting in the time or the energy, or I don't.
Yeah, it's just time.
Yeah, it's like
but not really a marathon.
No, it's all time and energy, but I'm not doing it, and I'm like, I don't want to be there. And I'm having too many side hustles, for me, it was like politics. I'm working on campaigns, I'm organizing, but I'm not doing the corporate law job work. I'm not there. Secondly, for me, for anyone who's listening who comes from a working class background, you get paid a lot of money when you're a corporate lawyer. And it was the money and what that money meant to my family. My dad would be like, I remember I got my first check at Davis Polk, he framed it, because it was like, what? You're making in a month what I make in a year? You know what I mean? Like, it was just, wow, yeah. It was just, and so that whole, like, I'm finally made them proud kind of thing by the money was, like, even though for me, the money wasn't, I was making a dent in my loans. I wasn't, like, living life large, you know what I mean? I had a, 300 square foot apartment, but it was, what it looked like was that I was fulfilling the American dream, but I was miserable. And I knew I was miserable. I wasn't fulfilled. And again, I feel very lucky because I knew when I was 12, 13, kind of what the path and the work that I wanted to do. So I was so off path. And I'm getting older now. Now I'm like in my early 30s and I'm like, wait, I'm not young again. Like, I can't go do something that's so off path for me and then go find later what I really want to do. I got to make a move. And so I often tell people, for me, I make changes when I hit rock bottom. And I was rock bottom. I was like, that Sunday night feeling when you're just sick because you don't want to go to work the next day. That's how I felt every single day for like a year or over a year. And I knew that it was time to go. So I quit. And I, before I quit, there was this, there was a whisper in New York City that there was going to be this open congressional race. And I've always been obsessed. I've always been into politics. I've always been an organizer. I was active in Democratic politics. So I was like, okay, here's my shot. I'm going to run for office. And it was just, it's about the blissfulness of naivety and being young.
Yeah, right.
And not really understanding that, like, you had that's never happening. You know what I mean? Or like you have a zero, you just so much chance like to win the lottery. But I really believed that I could work really hard and I had a great story and I could meet every voter and that I could get there.
And and then coming out of that experience, obviously what were some of the takeaways, for you, I guess, because then you went on again, instead of going back, you did a little bit of going back to like public advocate type work, but what were the takeaways from that to where then you said, okay, coming out of this, again, not happy in that setting, running for office, learning some of the things you talked about, to then starting Girls Who Code.
Yeah.
So maybe just like some of the top takeaways and what was it? I know that you kind of became aware during your campaign of this gender disparity. So talk a little bit about the takeaways and the genesis of Girls Who Code.
Well, the best thing about running a campaign is you basically know how to run a business. It's just like launching, like you have to raise capital, you have to figure out, you're the product, you have to figure out the brand, the messaging, you got to sell it, you got to inspire people, and then you got to shut it down. So I had never done that. I'd started organizations, but in this kind of way. And so that gave me a lot of confidence that I could launch something or start something and then get people to invest in me and invest in the idea. It also, like, that running for Congress, my first television interview was on Chris Matthews. I didn't even know where to look at the screen. I had to go into rooms full of senior citizens and talk about my policies. I had to give, I raised $1.4 million in 10 months as, again, this 33-year-old no-name person. I was, on the front page of the New York Times and top of the fold a couple of times. And so everything was just, imagine being 30. And again, it was just me and a bunch of ragtag kids. I couldn't turn to my parents. I didn't know anybody who was trying to do this. And so I lived that the fear of it was so exciting and so freeing, because it's like I'd almost done the scariest thing that you could ever do in my early 30s. And it didn't work out at all. Not even close. I was crushed. And like, I was broke afterwards. Nobody would hire me because I had run against somebody who was not happy I had run against her. But I was like, wow, like if I could fail at the thing that I had been wanting my whole life, and yeah, it sucks, and I'm drinking a lot of margaritas, you know what I mean? And I'm depressed, but I'm ready to fight another day. It was just eye-opening, because like the worst thing I thought could happen happened. And I'm not like, you know what I mean, in my bedroom, not able to get up. So that was like a big revelation. And I think it gave me the confidence in myself that I could again build something. And so it also made me realize I ain't going back to that corporate job. Like I am not going back to misery, because even though I lost that 10 months of running the campaign was probably still the best 10 months of my life in terms of this connection between what I was, the closest I had ever been to doing the work that I was meant to do. And then it's I think it's like you said, it could have went a couple different ways, from that, right? Where it's like, this is what I was meant to do, and it didn't work out. So like, now what? And I think, the fact that, you're talking, really sounds like it empowered you to be like, okay, that didn't work, but now like, I know that this world is my path. Yeah. And the thing I think I'm sure you're a big sports fan, but like, when you think about the best, like LeBron or Kobe, right? It's, early on in their careers, they have something that doesn't work out for them. Like, they don't get picked in the first draft. they miss that 3-pointer that would have been changed. And because of that, they have a chip on their shoulder. They're like, okay. And I was like, all right, you're not going to elect me? I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you that I can make a difference for your life. You know what I mean? And make a difference in the lives of your daughters, your community. Like, I'm going to show you. So instead of it making me question myself, It actually gave me that chip on the shoulder. And that's what made me build Girls Who Code into this. I'm like, I'm not just teaching a couple girls. I'm going to teach 1 million girls. And I'm going to teach more girls than any school district, any president, like any governor. Like, I'm going to show you that I'm going to make a difference and I can make change. And that's, I think in many ways, I don't think I would have been driven to scale in that time period and do it with, again, I worked my butt off every single day. I got on 2 planes, 2 trains. I would strap my baby to my back, raise, $50, $100, $1,000 at a time. I would not afraid to email Bill Gates and be like, okay, I need your help. I was relentless in building this organization. And it really, 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 really attributed to that loss.
Wow. What was it? What was it about that topic, right? Again, which is not, it's like, which is not again, kind of from your exact experience, right? From before, what was it about Girls Who Code, right? And the engineering side, what did you see in your campaign? What was it where you're like, this topic, this movement is I'm into this.
So I think it started about the money, meaning I was like, what? You can make $120,000 as a software programmer? I need to, why are there not girls? Why are there not, working class girls? Why are there not girls of color? So part of it was wow, that I still am. I am fascinated about the march to the middle. I'm fascinated about the march to the American dream. The fact that only in this country can you literally come from nothing, you know what I mean? And have, I think, anything you want, right? And so for me, the idea that you could be an engineer or a software programmer and you can go from living in a homeless shelter or your mom working at Kmart, and you then can go work at Microsoft or Facebook or Google and literally buy your mom a home. What? Wow, let's get all of them. So that's where it started. And then when I ran my first program, I had seen, part of the idea was that girls would come to the program, and at the end they had this project where they could solve anything that they cared about. And when I went around the room, it was my daddy has cancer and I want to find a cure for him. So I want to build an algorithm. Or, my auntie runs a bodega and she doesn't have a website and she lost her business after a hurricane or Sandy, and I want to build something for her. Or my brother's dyslexic and I want to figure out how to teach him to read. So it's all these young girls wanted to make the world better. And technology was the way that they were going to able to do that. And so then that became if I'm not going to get elected to Congress, fine. What if I could build a generation of young women that will barnstorm Washington and make the change that I probably couldn't even have made as one person. And so those two things together, the opportunity aspect of what these jobs could mean for people, and then the change making that they could do, is what just moved me.
Yeah, it's crazy. In the hundreds of thousands of people that you've impacted, where did the name come from?
Oh, because that's what I was doing. It was I always believe you should name really obvious names, Girls Who Code. That's what we're doing, teaching girls to code. But it was funny when I started though in 2010. People thought coding was what happens when people flatline, when they are going into cardiac arrest. So that's what they thought I was teaching. Right. I was no. But now it's really wild. In 10 years, I did Hillary Clinton helped launch my book, and at my book party she said something that she was Reshma, when you first started Girls Who Code, people oh, that's so cute, Reshma's doing that, right. She's teaching those, she's they didn't know what you were doing. And now 10 years later, it's you go to any college, those are my students, those are my kids. You go to any tech company, those are my, I literally can't even go to the airport. Yeah. I can't go anywhere without meeting a girl, a mom, a grandmom, somebody, a dad, who's my daughter went through your program. And so it's extraordinary, what can happen. And again, what failure can lead to, and what I'm so happy. I wasn't a coder. I had never started a nonprofit before. Exactly. This was not my field. And I'm so happy that I didn't even worry about that maybe we'd be on this podcast and you'd be like, hey, Reshma, can you explain to me HTML? And I would be like, I don't know, right? Like the fact that we think we have to be experts in something, but we don't. We just have to have passion for solving a problem.
I love that message. Yeah, I think in a lot of people, they call it imposter syndrome or something. It's like, well, I'm not an expert or I don't know. And it's like, yeah, you do. Like you have other things that equal success or drive or whatever it is. And then what was the, for the podcast, Brave Not Bold? And we'll obviously link to the podcast. And then I want to talk about Marshall Plan and the book too. What was it about the podcast that you're like, oh, like this is something that I want to do? I'm always fascinated
about why people want to do a podcast.
Well, their motivations, right? Like for me, it's just like I just really enjoy spending an hour and just hearing stories and not talking. For me, it's like just asking decent questions and talking to really cool, interesting people like you. And for you, I mean, you've had AOC, Joe Biden, a whole bunch of folks on the podcast. Like for you, what was it like? This is going to be like fun.
Yeah, I mean, I give this TED Talk, Brave Not Perfect, and 5 million people watch it. I write a book, and I'm called Brave Not Perfect, and I'm like, I want to ignite a bravery revolution. And I think podcasts, are still great ways to reach people, and have people hear that message. And again, all these different stories of different women and men and their relationship to bravery and their relationship to perfection. So it's fun. I mean, we put it on hiatus. I'm launching another one soon on another topic, but it's hard work. As you know, like it's hard work. But I similar to you, I love interviewing people. I love talking to people. I love hearing their stories. I love, like that moment when, you've asked somebody something that maybe they haven't been asked before and they're like they're thinking about it and they say something and you're like, it's an accelerator for other people that are listening in terms of what they want to do too. So it's huge.
Right? Like now everyone knows that you were a badass in middle school and that you got into a fight on the playground like that. I mean, I'm like, that's fantastic. Like it's really interesting from doing the podcast, just how many, there's every person, we all have these moments. It's the flavors of that type of thing that then puts the chip on your shoulder at this point and this point. And so, I totally get it. And so, all right, so fast forward. So Girls Who Code is taken off. It's really become a movement more than just an organization. And then you kind of, as like the pandemic starts, you go into this Marshall Plan for moms. To talk about maybe like what was it that for you, like you got a lot going on. Girls Who Code is not getting smaller, right? It's continuing to grow and blow up. And you're like, I want to go now do this other really big movement around, again, advocating for moms in the workplace. Yeah. And what was it that made you want to move to that or to start, Marshall Plan?
I resisted it. So you're right. I started 2020, Girls Who Code as a Super Bowl ad. I was going to make it bigger than ever before. The pandemic hits. And, look, I had been thinking about stepping down as CEO, for a couple of years, just because I think when you get to the 8-9 year mark, you should never run an organization longer than that. And I had kind of built a solid foundation. I had somebody that I wanted to run the organization. But then the pandemic hit. And I found myself, with 2 little kids, working full time and, and having a leadership team that was mostly all working moms. And we were getting crushed. And what we were saying to each other, in those early months, well, when the school opens in September, everything will be fine. And I remember getting that note from our Department of Education being like, we have launched this idea of, Zoom school where you get to log in your 6-year-old at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 11 o'clock, all the while you maintain your full-time job. Congratulations. I remember the first thing I thought, Jake, was like, wait a minute, aren't you going to ask me? And here's the thing. I mean, we knew, because America does these time and use sheets, we knew that in March, April, May, that the parent that was doing the most amount of homeschooling was the mom. And that she was being forced to supplement her, her paid labor for unpaid labor. Yeah. And that is, so if you shut down the schools, you were probably going to push millions of women out of the workforce. But they did it anyway. And, the ramifications of that on so many women's lives, dreams, hopes, everything, mental health was enormous. And it terrified me and it pissed me off. And then, you did see, 3-4 million women leave the workplace overnight. And remember, in the start of the pandemic, for the first time in the history of our nation, women were 51% of the labor force. And so it took a long time to get there. And so you couldn't lose that amount of progress and think it's an on and off shift. So I remember just thinking there, like, as I'm sitting here, homeschooling my kids, like in my pajamas, like trying to again, like where's the plan? Like someone's going to have a plan, right? Like waiting for the president, waiting for the Congress, waiting for CEOs. And there was nothing. And, and for us as mothers, we were talking all the time. My PTA, I'm on the PTA, right? Like about what we needed. And so, I wrote an op-ed called "We Need a Marshall Plan for Moms." Followed that up with a full page ad in the New York Times to President Biden, basically being like, we don't work for free. Got 50 women, from Amy Schumer to Gabrielle Union to sign it. And it just went viral. And, I made the mistake of reading the comment section. And I realized for the first time, and this is naive too, that motherhood is controversial. That there were people who, even though it was the women that were being pushed up, that they were just, well, what about the dads? And that people on the right were like, well, wait a minute, you chose to be a mom, so you don't get anything from government. You don't get anything from your employer. You don't even get anything from your partner. And it was just, again, similar to seeing those girls, and the lack of girls in those classrooms 10 years ago. Yeah. I was like, oh, this is a gnarly problem. This is a complex problem that has huge implications on the thing that I feel like I am meant to solve, which is equality. And so that is what, and listen, building Girls Who Code for the past 10 years, I told you it was unicorns and rainbows. It wasn't all unicorns and rainbows. It was hard.
Oh, I'm sure there's comments there too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
but just, sure. Being an entrepreneur is like, it's a reason why you don't have serial entrepreneurs. You kind of do it once and you're like, thank you. I do not want to do that again. And I'm a social entrepreneur. It's the same thing. Like, so I'm right now as I'm building, have a team of 3, about to hire 2 more, trying to raise money, making, getting my hustle, trying to get people to believe in me. It's the same, and you have to do it all over again. And, it's interesting too, because people, for some reason, I've been thinking about this, people today are not as charitable, than they were even 5 years ago, 4 years ago. So it's much harder to build nonprofits because people just aren't giving in the same way. People also will give to girls much more than they'll give to women. And so that's another thing. It's something that's hard to kind of like to build, but I love it. I love it.
Yeah. You tend to not just your career. You tend to not pick easy challenges. You tend to, and is that where? And as we start to kind of wrap up in the next 5-10 minutes or so, let's talk about the book. Is that really where the book pay up? For those of you who don't, we'll link to it obviously, and I really encourage everyone to read it. Is that where the start of pay up came from? And obviously you've written books before. Is that kind of the idea around, again, empowering women and moms and really just understanding, why it's, again, like, part of it's, why it's different than you think. Where did the desire to write this book?
Because I think we got it all wrong, and I got it all wrong. Like, we had been telling women that to, barnstorm the corner office and to girl boss their way to the top, and that all you had to do was just lean in a little harder. And I think all of us learned in the pandemic the hard way that having it all is just a euphemism for doing it all. And that the solution to women's equality is not about color coding your calendar and getting a mentor or getting a sponsor, with to stop trying to fix the woman and fix the structure. Now, if you are a woman today in the workforce, everything that you're getting is about, the reason why you're not getting to the top is you're broken. You know what I mean? Like, you just got to power pose and you just got to raise your hand and you just got to, And the reality is you're doing 2.5 jobs before you even show up to work. The reason why we're not getting to equality is because 2/3 of the caretaking work is still being done by women. And we should not have to choose between being a mom and having a job, And so I think that we have to completely, yes, we have to pass a bunch of bills in Congress, but we also have to redesign workplaces. So I don't know about you, Jake, but like both of my parents worked at the same company for 40 years. And their bosses knew my name, where I went to high school, what I was doing. They still, send me notes. I always looked forward to the company barbecue. But somewhere along the line, we have lost our family values in the workplace. And we're paying the price of that, which is why we're treating employees like they're cogs in a wheel and just expendable. And it's why people are quitting. You have the Great Resignation, 4 or 5 million people quitting every month. And they're not quitting because they don't want to work. They're quitting because they don't work for you. And I think what the pandemic showed us is we all spent a lot more time with our kids, a lot more time with our parents, a lot more time in our churches, in our communities. And we're like, I want to live differently. I want to work differently. Yeah. And so that's what this book is about. It's not just for moms, it's for everybody about how do we redesign workplaces? Because I think if you redesign workplaces to work for a single mom, you know what I mean, and you provide her structure in infrastructure, you give everybody that. Like, I know so many dads are like, I don't want to commute 2 hours a day and see my kid for 20 minutes at bedtime. I want to take him to school. I want to play soccer with him. I want to throw a ball around the yard like my dad used to with me. And so we have this opportunity, and this is why I hope everybody reads my book, to really fundamentally change the way we live and work. I feel like the pandemic, we've already kind of changed the way we live. Now we got to change the way we work.
I love that. And I could not agree more. I think the idea that everyone wants to work from 9 to 5, and then even return to work, like, the data is starting to come out about return to work, where people are like, are you kidding me? Wait, so I'm supposed to come in 2 or 3 days a week. I pick the days. And then if my team doesn't come in, I'm on Zoom all day in the office. And I feel like it's like, the solution for so many people is like, well, let's just kind of go back to what we were doing before, and let's do a flavor of that. The reality is, I think about this all the time. For my own company, right? I run a company of 50 plus people, and it's I think my realization has been the future of being a CEO or being an employer is you're going to have to meet people with what they want to do. And if you've got really talented people that only want to work 30 hours, 25 hours, 40, whatever, or they want to work 50 or say whatever, it's creating different boxes for different people, to where things can still be equitable across what people are allowed and not allowed, to do. But that to me is the future. That the future of work for me is each person being able to work the way that they want, in a way that still powers forward the organization. And we found it from 1099s and other folks as well too, contractors, that just because someone isn't in the office 40 hours a week or isn't doing XYZ doesn't mean they're not still stupidly talented and can contribute in an obscene way.
Absolutely.
So I really feel like it's an important message for so many to hear. And I think that there are are there organizations that you're seeing that are doing a great job of this, or like who out there are you like, or when you think about this new framework and ways to set it up, like what are some of the tips or advice that, or organizations that you see doing a great job?
Well, one, I think we have to have a different conversation between like return to work and not return to work. I think we have to really say we're not returning back to the old normal. We're going to build something new. So let's take this year to experiment, and talk about it as an experiment. And so I think that there are different companies that are doing different things, but I don't know if I wouldn't say I have a model yet. Because I do feel like it's a little bit all over the map.
Sure.
But I think that it is, and maybe that's the point. Like, it depends on the work culture. Maybe in some consulting cultures where you are traveling a lot or you are seeing lots of different clients, you don't have to be in the office at all. And everybody can work, remotely. But I think we have to start focus. I do think who is kind of thinking about this smartly, of course, are big tech, right? Because big tech hasn't been in the office for a long time, pre-pandemic, because their engineering, and as you know, their engineers didn't want to be in the office. So they've spent a lot more time on designing technology for hybrid work. how do we design core collaboration hours?
Right.
How do we think about how we design technology so everybody feels like they're in the room? How do we make sure that we're maybe all coming together, quarterly? We're giving people advance notice about that. We're maybe having daycare centers whatever it is, but they're already there. You know what I mean? Thinking about those things. The other thing that they're thinking that I'm really, we're launching in a couple of weeks a national business coalition around childcare is I think the future is about subsidizing people's childcare, because the other piece of this is that childcare has gotten so expensive that it is the largest cost center for many families. It's like healthcare is. And you couldn't work before unless your employer paid some form of your healthcare. So the idea of subsidizing some childcare and making, again, going back to saying, I know I'm gonna go back to family values. And I'm gonna go back to, what do you need to feel less, like, how can I support so you can go take that family vacation? So you can go put your kid in college. How can I alleviate some of that cost? Again, childcare is so you can work. That's right. Why we have childcare, right? And so it is an economic cost, so we have to start talking about it. No, it's not. But it's coming, Jake.
I'm not seeing it at all. I'm seeing a lot of other benefits, right? I'm seeing a lot of companies, and we work with some of these companies too, that are doing some amazing things around like fertility, caregiver support. But definitely not seeing that, right? It's like, again, like you are in it, and again, like you said, a lot of this does fall to the spouse, right? The woman in the relationship, right? With the data. And the reality is you're paying to go to work.
You are.
Right?
You're oftentimes making less to work. You're losing money to work. Here comes my son. I'm just finishing up a podcast. I'll be back.
We've got my kids. And again, speaking of, like, my kids are downstairs.
Here comes okay. They found me.
We're gonna wrap
they
up
found me.
A couple of minutes. I heard it. Yeah, I've got a 4 and a 7.
Oh my gosh, I have a 2 and a 7-year-old.
There you go. Perfect. So you've got the gap. And I love it. This mom.
Yeah.
Mom, that happens all the time.
I smell you.
Early in the pandemic. Like me, like almost like Heisman Trophy, like palming my son's head. like you get, like, you're not like pushing him. You're like, stop it. Like, stop it.
Oh my god!
And like you can't. I'm still like maintaining eye contact.
But it's so funny.
While,
it doesn't even. I don't even hear it. Like, I'll literally be on an interview and like they'll be like, "I hear your baby." I'm like, "Really?" Like, it's so part of the sounds of work now for me. It
100% is, and that has been. I think there is that humanity element that the pandemic has brought to certain situations, and improved, not still where it needs to be, empathy at times for those types of situations. Whereas before, it was like, you'd almost be mortified if your kid or somebody, and now it's like,
but that's why I think I always say this is the new resistance of going back to the old normal, because they are really pushing for us to go back to that. And I think the mental toll that's going to take on people, because we'll say this for me, like, I can work and still see my 2-year-old in those moments, and it makes me feel so much more productive. Whereas before with my oldest, I saw him 10 minutes a day, and I was like, no, I don't want to do that. Like, I don't want to see him every day, every minute. But that's me. But you know what I mean? Right. I think we just we can't take away from people what we've given them, which has been such a blessing.
I love that. I think it's a good note for us to kind of wrap up on. And like I said, we'll link to the book and some of the other topics that we've talked through. And Reshma, like, again, I really appreciate you joining us. I think a lot of people are going to have some pretty amazing takeaways and hopefully feel inspired to take action into whatever their passion is, and to lean into companies that can support them the way that they want to be supported as well too. And definitely recommend everyone check out the book as well. So
thank you.
Big thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in to another extremely fun and interesting episode. I thought it was fun and interesting, so I hope you did too, of the Jake Dunlap Show. Really great, just breaking down everything that makes people who they are, the success, the trials and errors, and I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I did. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite platform, and make sure, more than anything, to go over to jakedunlap.com. That's where you're going to stay up to date on all the latest guests, additional details, prep notes. We're going to be sharing everything on jakedunlap.com. So go ahead, go over there. You can subscribe there as well too. And we will see you next week on the Jake Dunlap Show.